My mind is upset. I can change my mindset. Do not be thrown offset. Rumor time, reset. Rumor time.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Yvonne Marie Laria, and I am one of your hosts for the Access Rumor Time Conversations podcast. It's good to be back. We took a vacation for a while because GC School had some things going on, but we're back, and we're back in full force. And we're looking forward to having conversations with you all. So thank you for tuning in, and let's hear from our other co-host, Mr. Georges W. Prosper.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Georges W. Prosper, and I'm excited to be co-hosting with you this evening. I'm excited to get back in the crux of things so we can start these conversations that impact our communities so we can start to get the healing that we so rightly deserve.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here I am again, Dr. Geneva Levy-Fleming, bringing you greetings from South Carolina. I totally agree with you, Georges. It's time for us to get back to the discussion. Come back to the table, because we got some things we must discuss. So I'm so glad we're back here this evening. And Vanessa, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vanessa Kelly-Brew, and I am also a host for the Access Rumor Time Conversations podcast. And like everyone else, I am excited to be back together again. Like Dr. Murray said, Murray Larier said, it's been a while since we've been together, and we are ready, like Geneva said, to get back into it and have these conversations that are impacting all of our listeners. And so this evening, what we would like to talk about is the fact that July is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And we would like to talk about what that means. And so, Geneva, talk to us.
As you know, NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And so they have a statement acknowledging Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, and it reads as thus: mental health conditions do not discriminate based on race, color, gender, or identity. Anyone can experience the challenges of mental illness regardless of their background. However, background and identity can make access to mental health treatment much more difficult. Now, this Mental Health Awareness Month was established back in 2008, and we probably need another conversation to talk about how and why, what were some of the root causes why July was dedicated as National Mental Health Awareness Month. But each year, millions of Americans face the reality of living with a mental health condition. And so we need to recognize what that must be like. So taking on the challenges of mental health conditions, health coverage, and the stigma of mental illness requires all of us. In many communities, these problems are increased by less access to care. They are increased by cultural stigma, and they are also increased by lower quality care. Now, why is that?
We have in mental health or mental illness, whichever terminology you want to use, both of which are stigmatizing. Underneath that umbrella, we have issues related to, like it said, like Nami said, we have issues related to lack of access to care, to mental health care. We have the lack of education surrounding mental health and mental illness. We have misdiagnosis. We have cultural arrogance and ignorance related to mental health, especially in the communities of color, where these labels and language have been put upon us by the other, ascribing labels. Then we have issues related to quality of care, inequity in care, of care. We have disparity of care. All of those are part and parcel. Then we have systemic racism in mental health care, access, labeling, stigma. It's embedded throughout the fabric of the mental health domain, the mental health domain of a person's development, lifespan development. So that's and I'm sure I haven't hit all of them, but that's the broad picture of mental health. And some of the elements that are under that banner. We're not going to be able to deal with all of them this evening, but I think we need to be at least recognize that those some of the subtopics, each of which can stand on its own as its own topic. But those are some of the elements of when we're talking about mental health. You have to be able to understand all these different pieces to it, and especially with people in communities of color and people of color.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you said that because it fits. From my perspective, I see mental health as a slice of the pie for the whole, for health, health and wellness. It's a piece of the pie. And I'm just not impressed with the data that I'm always reading about health disparities. So as long as I've been on the scene and looking at research data and the outcome of that data, people that look like me, has been at the bottom of the totem pole for everything that's good, and at the top of the totem pole for everything that's bad. And I have a problem with that because it appears that researchers, knowingly or unknowingly, I really don't know that, but we tend to just skirt around the issue and not get to the root. And we recognize that in order to bring about any kind of change, we got to get to the root. And perhaps there's some things that might need to be unearthed regarding minority mental health and just health, period, amongst communities of color. What is that? And why is that? And Dr. Larry, you mentioned racism and systemic racism. I'm glad, I'm happy for all the unrest that I see that's happening globally. I think that's the beginning of some necessary disruption. And perhaps in doing so, we will eventually start to unearth some of these systemic issues that has kept people, individuals, and communities in a labeled box for decades upon decades upon decades.
So yeah, and so there's an African proverb that says, until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. I'll say it again.
Yes.
Until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. You asked the question, you talked about the research always shows people of color at the bottom of the totem pole for negative outcomes.
Right.
And no, at the bottom of the totem pole for positive outcomes, but at the top of the totem pole for negative outcomes.
Yeah. That's
some
correct.
of that, right? So some of that has to do with this proverb. Who's telling the story?
Thank you.
Okay, who's telling the story? How many, and all of this goes to, people may wonder, well, what does this have to do with mental health awareness? It has everything to do with it.
Everything.
If you remove a person's voice, if you are the one who always tells the story of the lion, you telling your side of the story and the story of the lion. That's one perspective. That is one perspective.
Which means it's one-sided.
You're not hearing the voice of the lion. You're not hearing the voice of the person, the minority person. And we're going to talk about this label called minority in our next segment. But until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. If you think about that, think deeply about that, and connect it and apply it to every system in our society. Who is telling the story? And who's the lion?
I'm so glad you're sharing that, Dr. Laria. And I didn't have that quote, but it's something for me, if you can mute your mic, something that I definitely will add to my classroom discussion as I am encouraging my students to tell their story, to write, to document. We must take authority in telling our own stories.
Absolutely. For too long, we have allowed and been disallowed to tell our story. I think Georges looks like he wants to say something.
Yeah, and I remember watching a story, a TED Talk, on the danger of a one-sided story, and for me that stood out because when I look at the history books, I always see it starts off with slavery, us being in chains, not being able to read, not being able to write because we'd be punished, us being chased and killed, murdered in horrible ways. But there's a story before we were slaves. There's a story before we got put on those boats. There's a story prior to that. And that story has never been told. And it seems like they only want to start from the point where they are victorious, the point that they brought healing from their perspective. So when you talk about the lion and the hunter, for me, that says a lot because the hunter is going to say whatever makes him look good. But the lion can talk about the glory days prior to being invaded by foreigners.
Absolutely. And every system in our culture is based on the story of the hunter and the story of the hunter being glorified. Everything is from their perspective. And that TED Talk by Chinebe, I can't remember her name, but she's a Nigerian author, amazing speaker, amazing. The danger of a single story. I share that TED Talk with my students every single year. Every year. It's a required video, it's a required TED Talk. Yeah, it's dangerous. It's a dangerous thing. And the American society was built on the hunter telling his story, glorifying himself.
And I think that's why I think it's important right now especially as we continue to aid the next generation to continue to tell them not just about our story, but about the places where we went right, where we went wrong, and the places of growth that we need to have, so we can make sure that our story doesn't stay the same way. Because if you
Yes.
stay stuck reading the same book and you have the same ending every single time and we don't grow, it means that we, as the authors of this generation, we're not helping our next generation to know that they are more than what they were told that they are. They are more than what the hunter's story says. They're more than what society's perspective of them are. I was speaking to Lynn, and I was telling her, I was like, look, for me, one of the things I've noticed is a person will meet you and judge you based on what they don't know about you, just based on what they see. So recently, I kind of went and I wanted to kind of like just check out to see what life would be like working in another industry, and I did not submit my resume. I did not tell them about any of my 2 master's degrees, about any of the languages that I speak. I didn't say anything about that. I just wanted to get in there, do my work, go home. I just wanted to see what it would be like in this new industry. And because they did not know anything about me, I was treated so horribly. I was disrespected. I was just told, just keep up. And I kept on looking at them. I was like, if I could master Greek and Hebrew, another language, within a year, within 8 months, what makes you think I can't master this if I'm taught properly? If I can go get 2 master's degrees, what makes you think I can't master this if I'm taught properly? But I noticed that I was put at a disadvantage because I'm a minority. I should know how to do this. And because of their false notion of what they thought, I never got the training that I was supposed to get. So subsequently, I left because I said, you're never going to train me, because in your mind, you don't see a person with a brain, you just see muscles. When I look at the Black quarterbacks and the other quarterbacks within the NFL, I notice that most of the individuals within scouts, they won't ever call a Black quarterback a smart quarterback who's intellectual. No, they say he is a raw athlete. His athleticism is something that cannot be matched by anyone else. But when they speak about the white quarterbacks, he's smart. He's able to read the passes well. And then you see the language switch, same position, but they switch the language based on the person who's going to be the leading commander of the group. And I stop and I'm like, why is this so? And that's because for years, they didn't look at us as intellectual. And when I say they, is those who wanted to marginalize us as a people. They wanted to look at African Americans, anyone who's of minority, anyone who's of color. They don't have the intellect to do. They're just brute, and that's it. So now when we start to switch the story to say, no, we are more than what you think we are. We're doctors, we're lawyers, we're engineers. If you give us a chance and you give us the same start, then we can have a good outcome as well. And I think that's where right now I want to focus most of my attention, is trying to make sure that moving forward, we can try. I know the scales might lean towards the other side a little bit more than I wanted to, but at least to start the process of putting ourselves in a place of advantage to kind of say, we are capable of doing anything we put our minds to. With the right training, with the right education, we can do whatever it is. Labels can't stop me, because labels are just labels.
Georges, Thank you so much for that. I mean, very eloquent. Thank you for sharing that story with us. This is a good time to take a break. And when we come back, we are going to talk about those labels.
You're listening to Access Roomatime Conversations, a bi-monthly podcast that focuses on 5 social-emotional problem-solving strategies to help you become a conscious problem solver and an empowered life coach. Are you experiencing feelings of fear, anger, anxiety, hopelessness, helplessness? Then visit us at the Listening Oasis Wellness Space, www.listeningoasiswellness.com. Again, www.listeningoasiswellness.com. LISTENGOASISWellness.com. Welcome back to the Access Roomatime Conversations podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. We talked about the overarching topic of mental health, and we talked about the components of that underneath that umbrella. One of the things we talked about was labeling. And I take offense. I take offense to being called minority. And again, we got to go back to that proverb. Until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. The hunter is labeling me as a minority. It would make you, on the surface, it makes you think, oh, there's not a lot of people like me. Right? What does minority mean? That there's a majority. And if you're labeled as a minority, that means you are not in the majority. And that's a lie. Because globally, people of color globally make up the largest number of people. We are definitely not minority. But the hunter, who is the minority, has the mic and is getting to tell his story to make himself the majority. And so he's going to tell the story as he is the majority and I am the minority. And so therefore, at this point, I will not accept that label of minority because it does multiple things. Barring the fact that it is not true, it is a lie. I am not in the minority. People of color are not in the minority. The other impact that it has is it puts you, the person of color, in a subservient mindset. A mindset that says, oh yeah, I'm a minority. And so if I'm a minority, I don't really matter that much. And that means somebody is in the majority and that they have more power over me. And so you keep hearing a minority mental health awareness month, minority department, a minority grant, a minority this, and a minority. You keep hearing that. What's going to happen? what are you going to start believing about yourself? So what are we going to start believing?
People start to see themselves as that, and they start to seek after it.
And they start behaving like that, right? So it starts in the mind and language, and the language then does the work for the hunter. The language does the work for the hunter. He could sit back now, chilling, because he's put it out there. The label, that label now is just replicating itself across the globe, where you have a group of powerful people in the majority behaving, believing like they are the minority. Now that is some major mind control, and it has to start somewhere. And that is the danger of labeling. That is the stigma associated with mental illness. The biggest danger is language and label and labeling that impacts the communities of color. And we at GC Squad are hell-bent on making that shift, because it is wrong. You are not a minority. People of color across the globe. Read my lips. I know you can't see me, but read my lips. You need to stop calling yourself a minority. You are not.
Man, Dr. Larry, you just said a mouthful of truth, because it just echoes some thoughts that I had even when Georges was speaking in the earliest segment about books. This is just another example of the danger of a single story. And I'm reflecting on books and books available to children in schools, and books that are not exposing truth, and books that are really telling the story from the hunter's perspective. So much so that children of color, okay, well, if that's the way is that the way it is? I'm looking at the impact of the danger. I'm looking at the danger of the single story in this setting. And one of the things, and we're not here to talk about this tonight, but it has to do with negative thought and negative talk and all of these things that one might describe as mental illness. Excuse me. And that is that reportedly this year, especially, there's been an increase in suicide among young Black children. That's another conversation. But I'm hearing this, I'm reading these statistics, and I'm reflecting on what they are getting in school. And I'm thinking about what George has just said about what's being produced in the books. And so if I'm reading this about me, why should I feel good about me? If it's written, it must be true, right? If it's on TV, it must be true. Why would I want to be associated with something like that? Look at the danger of a single story and how all of that is impacting the thoughts and the mindsets of people of color. There's going to be a reaction, and people are reacting.
Yeah, people are reacting, and because it's an awakening. People are seeing what the hell?
What the hell?
And this what the hell mindset and attitude is not is global.
It is global.
You cannot continue to use those tactics and you say, well, what does this have to do with mental health? This is everything to do with mental health, because mental health is about one's ability to recognize, understand, manage, express, and reflect on their thoughts,
That's right.
their interactions,
That's right.
mindsets, and emotions as it relates to themselves, others, and their stories and their situations.
Absolutely.
That's mental health.
That's right.
And when a people who have been oppressed for hundreds of years wake up, when that sleeping lion is awakened and says enough is enough, and decides to take charge of their thoughts, their interactions, mindsets, and emotions, it may not play out in the way that you, the hunter, hoped it would.
And it's not.
And it's not.
And it's not.
And it's
The
not.
lion is waking up.
Mm-hmm.
The lion is having a revelation. And I believe that when there is revelation, there will be revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what is required
right
to bring about change.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am thankful for the revelation. Listen, this summer, reportedly, Black-owned bookstores have seen traffic like they have never seen before, especially by other people who are really doing what they want to learn. They're trying to understand more. The lion is waking up. They want to understand. They are beginning to recognize something's not quite right. And that's a piece of why we see what we see that's happening globally with all the unrest and all the protests. And I am happy about it. I support the disruption because it is absolutely necessary. I say the whole thing in every sphere of our environment needs to be
dismantled. It needs to be deconstructed and dismantled and disassembled to include other stories.
Absolutely.
You know, at the end of this, I want to refer people to that article that I wrote, Rooting Out Racism.
Lord.
I think it's an important article to read that talks about racism within all the structures of our societies, especially in mental health, especially in behavioral health. How how the establishment has perpetuated mental enslavement. And we as a people of color, we have to take control. And how does that work? Take control of our own mental wellness. So people like us who are all in the field of what we call here at GC School social emotional wellness, we have to lead the way. We have to disrupt the established way of doing things and relating, and stop labeling ourselves and each other using the hunters' labeling systems.
And I think it's time that we start holding people accountable who are holding us some of those truths. If you're a leader that we're going to hold you accountable. That's why we vote people in and out. And I know a lot of people just focus on voting who's the next president, but your local districts, that's where the real power lies. Because when you're being treated unjustly, that's who you allowed to get in power. Whoever is in power within your local district is the one that you have to hold accountable. The president has limited power, but those local officials, the rules that they set can either set your community backwards or propel you forward. So we have to be very strategic about holding them accountable. Even the school districts, we have to hold them accountable. They'll bust in teachers from everywhere and give them stipends and give them all types of reimbursement for coming to our inner cities and teaching our kids. But then you have teachers who are asking questions like, how much money does it, let's do a math problem. How much money would it take for Johnny to buy a slave if we were back in this? Whoa. Let's reenact slavery on the slave ship. Sit on the floor so we can have the white kids walk over you. What do you mean? If we don't hold people accountable who are within our communities, and that's minority and non-minority. Because just because you're minority, that doesn't mean you're not being used as a puppet. So we have to make sure we hold everybody accountable. If we elected you, we're watching you. And if we're watching you, you better know this time that you have, if you don't do what's right by us, we're going to make sure to vote you out so we can get the right person. And that means making sure that those who are in school, they have the best education. So if a teacher is not teaching them right from the kindergarten to the 12th grade, how do you think they're going to fare in college? How's the job market going to look like for them? Those pivotal years between K through 12 are essential. Those are building blocks. I didn't know what I wanted to do because I wasn't taught. They chose specific kids and they poured into them. Now imagine if they had poured all of this intellect into every single child and say, we're going to give you an opportunity to be the best that you can be. What are you interested in? Now let's take that and let's grow it. Whatever it is, let's do that for you. Let's show you how to capitalize on it. You like to talk, you like to argue, let's look at being a lawyer. You like to just talk and research, fine, let's do journalism. I mean, there's so many different avenues, but if you don't know those avenues, you're never going to go in search of them. And you're going to be stuck trying to figure out, how do I make $1 out of 15 cents where you have all this gifting that can give you generational wealth. Yeah. But if Hunter continues to hold us down and we don't hold them accountable, we will always be listening to their story, and the generation after generation after generation will just be like, we're just stuck here. And I refuse to believe that we're just stuck here.
We're not just stuck here. We're not. And so that's why I think where it needs to, not one of the places, it needs to start in multiple places. But one of the places it can start that we have control over is languaging and labeling.
Mm-hmm. Good.
And so, this whole thing about minority this and minority that, I am not a minority.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The word on the street is, Yvonne Marie Laria, I'm not a minority. You heard me. Did you hear me? Did you hear me?
It just goes to show you the how systematically it's systematically ingrained. Mm-hmm. So much so that people of color just sort of bought into it. Yes. Listen, that's why I'm all for dismantling the structures that are here, because it's built on lies, falsehood,
lies.
It's from the hunter's point of view, and so it's they have done an awesome job of creating the best. And then people just sort of kind of buy into it. Yes, I'm a minority and want to be, because part of the system is, well, if you're a minority, you qualify for this, that, and the third.
Exactly. Exactly.
So this, that, or the other.
Exactly.
So, yes, I'll be a minority so I can.
And so it's like what? It's like on one hand giving you something, and on the other hand taking it back, right?
So ladies, that's what I would like to know, like realistically, what can we do to begin to deconstruct and dismantle, right? Because Yvonne, what you said is it starts with the language.
Right, that's one place. That's one place it can start, and that's something we have control over.
So that's my question, is when the hunter has been the one who has given you the language or the narrative, how then, and the lion has bought into this, how then do you go and tell the lion, okay, I know you have bought into this, but now let me tell you, there is a different way. There's a way for you to tell the story. So how does the lion then begin to do that?
I think we should pick this up in the next segment. Is that what you were thinking, Georgia? Is okay.
All right.
Very good question, Vanessa.
That's the work then.
Are you experiencing feelings of fear, anger, anxiety, hopelessness, helplessness? Then visit us at the Listening Oasis Wellness Space, www.listeningoasiswellness.com. Again, www.listeningoasiswellness.com. LISTENGOASISWellness.com. The Access Roomatime Conversations podcast is brought to you by GC Scored and the Leadership Institute, and your co-host, Dr. Yvonne Murray-Larrier, Dr. Geneva Fleming, Vanessa Kelly-Brew, Lynn Prosper, and Georges Prosper. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to the Access Roomatime Conversations podcast.
We've talked about a lot of great things in this podcast, right? We've talked about the systemic issues that we have, right? Not just racism, but we've talked about disparities in care. We've talked about lack of education, like surrounding mental health and issues related to lack of access. We've talked about all of those things, and we've talked about the story, but the story being told by the hunter, right? And that story then affects the lion, right? So if the hunter is telling the story and you don't hear the voice of the lion, how does that impact the lion?
Because healing comes within time. With enough time, you can have an open wound. It's going to heal. Listen.
But go ahead.
I was going to say the healing process is the waking up of the lion. The lion is coming to reckon. Hold up.
But what if the lion doesn't know that the lion is sick because the hunter has been the one telling him?
And that is what has happened for hundreds of years.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And what is happening now
Truth.
is that some of the lions and lionesses okay, are saying, what the what? You
That's
putting
right.
your knee on my neck and you're
That's right.
smiling.
That's right.
You hunting me down like I'm a lion for real.
Mhm.
You not giving me you what?
Mhm.
Okay, so
Truth.
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 How do we, and time? Yes, time is important. Geneva says it will happen in time. But here's something I say to add to that. Nothing, time doesn't make a difference unless you do something with that time.
If I
That's
can say,
it. I agree. That's it.
Go ahead,
in
Georges.
recognizing the time aspect, I think about the Willie Lynch theory that was set years ago, and they said it would take about 300 years before that gets dismantled. And that was a systematic way of brainwashing us to believe that we were nothing.
Yeah.
That we
And
were minorities.
yes, now that 300 years, it just passed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why the waking up is coming right now, because that spell is not on us anymore.
Absolutely.
Because
Oh boy.
believe you.
I'm so glad you shared
There's
that.
the thumb
I
right
was
there.
going to get into Willie Lynch. So, my first response to Vanessa's question is you saying how is rooting out the Art Yvonne's article, rooting out racism. Racism is at the root of it all. Is everything is built on this evil called racism. So it has got to become unearthed. The other piece of my, when you asked the question, I thought racism has got to be unearthed. And the way that's going to get unearthed is rumor time. Rumor time. The world must recognize.
Mm-hmm.
The world must understand. The world, and so I believe we're in that recognizing state. We are coming to reckon right now.
Mm-hmm.
Revelation is taking place.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? the hunters on strategy is erupting against him. Okay,
it's boomeranging.
It's boomeranging. Thank you.
Yeah, it's boomeranging.
Because information and education is a contributing factor to the awakening, to the revelation. And people are reading more, they're studying more, and that's why they can ask the questions like, well, wait a minute.
What the what?
Okay, wait a minute now. So if this was this, then where was all these people? You read these history books and it appeared that the people in history only looked a certain way. But where were all the other people? Where are the colorful people? So it's that reckoning, that recognizing is taking place right now. And that's why I believe we're seeing a lot of the disruption. Listen, eyes haven't seen nor ears heard the stuff that's what is yet to be revealed. But I'm appreciative of the peace that's taking place right now. I do believe rumor time is the way. And for anybody that's listening, rumor time, rumor is an acronym that stands for recognize, understand, manage, express, and reflect on your thoughts, the thoughts you have about yourself, the thoughts you have about others, the thoughts you have about situations. It's your thoughts, your interactions with others, your mindset, and your emotions. Piece by piece. This is not, well, those of us in this conversation, we know it's not, an easy journey, but it's a necessary journey. We got to take the time, do the work, do the reckoning, understand it, understand this. We have to go back 300-400 years to bring about this understanding before we can get to a place where we can manage it. But one by one, I believe in every setting, wherever we're at, is a place where we can begin to start helping people to recognize and understand and manage, helping people to rumorize. The world don't know about rumorizing and the rumor time process, but there is a process. And I do believe it's a divine order that needs to be infiltrated throughout this earth to bring about the beautiful kingdom of God. That's what I believe.
But yeah, so the question, going back to Vanessa's question,
The how.
what was it again? How do we what?
Where do we start, right? So if the hunter has been the one who has been controlling the narrative, how does the lion then change the narrative if he has bought into that story?
Right, because he's been, there's an author and a public speaker, I can't remember her name, but she has coined the label post-traumatic slavery disorder. And that's what most of us are experiencing, right? And how do we change the narrative for the lion? How do we help the lion change and re-story the story, right? How do we do that? One, like I said, labeling, changing the labels, rejecting in our own interactions. GC Scored, we have started doing that, right? And it's not an easy road. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. Even with the line, even as we are trying to get the lions, which are in our discussion, the lions are the people of color across the globe, trying to get this community to detox themselves from the toxicity of the hunters' stories and lies. It's an uphill battle, but we have to be, it took how many years, right? 400 years, right? This is not going to happen overnight,
Okay.
but we have to start,
Gotta
right? And the small starts are, don't call me a minority. I'm not a minority. If you want to give me, if you want to give me funding, if you want to give me whatever there's available to me, you don't have to call me a minority, because first of all, it's a lie. Secondly, you're only giving me what is due me. So don't try to put me in some special category to say, well, that's why I'm giving it to you. No, it's mine. It's not yours only, it's mine as well. And so we can start to change the language in all of the way we're thinking, the way we interact, our worldview, our attitudes, mindsets, changing it.
Absolutely.
Let's change that word minority from being ascribed to us. We in GC Scored we do not use the mental health terminology in the framework, our social emotional wellness framework, because of this, because this is at the core of what we believe. It is mental enslavement, and we know, right? society knows, this is the thing, that labeling and language is a barrier. Listen to how this hunter, listen to how treacherous the hunter is. The hunter knows that language and labeling is a stigmatizing factor in people of color accessing mental health treatment. You hear me? Hear what I'm saying? Listen, follow closely. It is a known fact, researched fact. And if you want, you can also read one of our articles on the Journal of Global Engagement and Transformation. Labeling and language are barriers to people of color, especially accessing treatment for mental health challenges. Now, if as an establishment, if as a hunter, you cared about your lion and you heard, we've done a lot of studies and they show that just that language alone, just to label mental health, mental illness, stops 1/3 of the lions from coming to get relieved from what we're considering mental illnesses. 1/3 of them are not coming because of the label that we have assigned. As a compassionate, caring, honest, empathic, culturally competent hunter, wouldn't you say, oh my, let's change the language? If that's causing them to not come, and we want the lions to get the help that we say that they need, which is a whole other story, let's change the labels. Let's stop calling it mental illness, mental health, and use another word that's benign, that will remove the barriers, that will dismantle the barriers. That would make sense, right? I mean, wouldn't you think that that would be what?
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
It's right, but there's no interest in that.
There's no interest in that.
Because what you're saying is logical. That would be the smart thing to do if you really cared.
That would be the right thing to do and the smart thing to do. But that's not what the hunter wants to do. Absolutely. The hunter wants to continue keeping the lion subjugated, controlled, and oppressed in their state of the label that they put on them, because they're not following the narrative of the hunter. So we continue using language, mental health, mental illness, and we know that about 1/3 of people of color, and that might be even an underestimation, are not accessing the care. So we know that, and that's why we've chosen to come up with our own, based on research, practice, and the lived experiences of people of color. We listen to their stories because their stories matter. And GC Squad has developed its own strategy of helping especially people of color tell their stories without it being labeled, without it being stigmatized, without it being mystified and made to be some some type of, something out there that is unreachable and unimaginable and unfixable, so that the lion is just another way that the lion becomes overwhelmed and thinks, oh my gosh, this is, I must be totally just, when all it is just the lion has their story. They see the world from their perspective, never been able to tell their story, but the hunter still wants to control the narrative. And so to control that narrative, we're going to put some labels on you. We're going to tell you, girl, you just jacked the hell up. And you're not. So how do we help the lion? It starts with us. Those of us who, when Maya Angelou says, when you know better, what?
You do better.
You do better. We know better.
Right.
We understand.
That's right.
We understand what's happening with this system. And we have to change it. One by one, little by little. And so, even some of the lions will want to attack us. But you know your why. You know what you're here for. You just keep moving ahead.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, like we have to make sure that we start to change the narratives ourselves. And if I could add one more to that, is making sure that we start doing that at home. So they can say whatever they want to after the kids leave home, but if we start creating that atmosphere at the home, then it makes a big difference, because now they have to work hard to re-educate and treat our kids, reprogram our kids to believe that they're nothing. But once we start doing that at home, to say that you are important, you are valuable, you are worth it, you can do whatever it is that you can, that you put your mind to, whatever it is that you want to do, I think then our kids will have something to come back. But if you have nothing at home, you have no one at home telling you that you're awesome, telling you that you can do it, telling you that you can make it, it's easier for the hunter to tell you that you're just prey. So it starts at home.
It starts at home. But here's the thing too, Georges, all the lions and lionesses at home have bought into the hunter's narrative.
Yes, that is my thought. That is my thought. So, and I'm going to say this.
Wake them up.
That's why for those to whom much is given,
much is required.
Much is required. And so this is why our show, our podcast, the Access Real-Time Conversations, is important for people to hear. Because even if you don't agree with what we're saying, you need to at least listen. Because what the hunter wants to keep you doing is being ignorant. That's what the hunter wants to keep you doing.
So Georges mentioned starting at home, and I just want to share there's another African proverb that says the ruin of a nation starts in the homes of its people. So if we want to change that trajectory, we started in the home. So the success of a nation should also start and can start in the home of its people.
Absolutely. And so what we have to do, and what we at GC Squad is
what we are doing.
Yes. what we are doing at GC Squad is educating, equipping, and empowering people to become conscious problem solvers and empowered life coaches. We are putting in the hands of those lions and lionesses in the homes where the success of a nation begins, the homes where the ruin of a nation begins. We are mandated by a power that's outside of us and hiding us to educate, equip, and empower people. Empower these lions and lionesses to know that you can problem solve. You have the skills. And that you are not some aberration. You are not abnormal. You are not a minority. You are not a statistic. You are not your history didn't, like you said at the top of the hour, Georges, your history did not begin with slavery. That's not your history. That's not the full story. And so how do we begin to make inroads, Vanessa? Again, educating, equipping, empowering, using all mechanisms at our disposal, even creating mechanisms, even if it's not at your disposal. Like Tyler Perry said, I don't need to be at your table because I'm going to create my own damn table.
That's it. Yeah.
Quote. I don't know if that's the exact quote, but that was the essence. Okay. And that's what I took from that. Yeah. So, I don't want people to tell me, oh, you're misquoting Tyler Perry. Here's the essence. Here's the essence of what I got. Mm-hmm. You don't need nobody else's table. Create your own damn table. How about that? Okay. So
right.
Yeah, that's how we do. That's how we have to do it. So in your sphere of influence, Vanessa, in Georgia's sphere of influence, in Geneva's sphere of influence, whether it's at home, at work, where you're working with your clients,
everywhere. Is room time, and it does get back to room time. That education.
Yes.
Talking about changing. We're talking about life transformation.
Yeah.
Transforming the way a person think and the how and the what they believe, and we're talking about mindset changes. Mm-hmm. And so the renewal only comes until that can take place. And so it's important to be educated. It's important for us to keep the conversation going. It's important for us to tell our stories and to encourage other people of color to tell their stories. They have their own story. Tell it, and to then weigh what you read over here, and you weigh your own experience.
Yeah.
You synthesize that and come up with the difference.
Yeah.
And your story is true because you've experienced it.
That's exactly. And it's not an aberration, and it should not be marginalized or minimalized.
That's right. In any way.
Minimize. And you know what?
Right.
I could make up a word if I want to. Okay? It's my business. If I want to make up a word, I will make up a word. Okay? Ain't nobody could tell me that word ain't a real word. It is a real word.
Minimalize. That's right.
Minimalize. But yeah, I think that's what we have to do, right? So when you're talking with your clients, Vanessa and Geneva and Georges, when we're talking with our clients and they referring to themselves as a minority, you change that. Tell them, no, you're not a minority, and educate them. Do you understand that people of color are
more than
people?
We are the majority.
Yes, we are the majority. Educate. One to one, one to many. Yes. So that's how it changes. And I encourage people to go to the GC Squad website. It's a movement, people. And we're not bashing anybody else. We are encouraging, educating, equipping, and empowering people of color and other people to wake up and tell your story.
Absolutely. Because as we read from NAMI's website, at the top of our podcast, you know, they say that taking on the challenges of mental health conditions, that's health coverage and the stigma of mental health, it requires all of us, all people. It requires all of us, you know. And so we recognize what the problems are now, you know. Well, we recognize it. We need to help educate other people so that they can recognize as well. Because before you can do anything about it, you have to acknowledge that a thing exists. So that's the first step. They have to acknowledge, they need to become aware that this indeed is a problem. It's
a problem. Yeah. You can't fix something if you don't know it broke.
Amen.
And so that's why the Room Time process starts with what? Recognizing.
That's right. You got to recognize.
You have to recognize. Then you have to understand. And once you recognize and understand, then you can manage.
That's right.
But you can't start off trying to manage something, trying to control people, trying to control the narrative, because all of that is trying to manage, right? That's relationship management and what do you call that thing? Mass management, managing people, right. you know, all of that, managing the narrative. You can't stop. What you managing?
Start there, right? What are you doing?
What you doing?
Are you experiencing feelings of fear, anger, anxiety, hopelessness, helplessness? Then visit us at the Listening Oasis Wellness Space, www.listeningoasiswellness.com. Again, www.listeningoasiswellness.com. LISTENGOASISWellness.com. You're listening to Access Roomatime Conversations, a bi-monthly podcast that focuses on 5 social-emotional problem-solving strategies to help you become a conscious problem solver and an empowered life coach. Welcome back to the Access Roomatime Conversations podcast.
All right, so everyone, thank you. Thank you for this powerful discussion this evening. We started out by talking about the systemic issues that we see within our communities. And then that turned into discussing labels and the language, particularly when it comes to what we call the hunter providing the narrative and a one-sided narrative. And we discussed the fact that, you know, if the narrative of the hunter is the only narrative that we hear, what that then does to the lion. And all of this ties into mental health, because what we understand is that mental health is about being able to recognize, understand our thoughts, interactions, mindsets, and emotions. And so we talked about the power in being able to provide our own narrative and how we need to start doing that. How do we change that narrative?
I'm impressed by the title that article. I'm not sure, it might be a book, but The Danger of a Single Story. And I say, Willie Lynch was a hunter. And I thank God for the shift in the story. So he had a story when he wrote his letter more than 300 years ago. And now that story is being shifted. And I thank God for the shift.
I want to say, remember that you are the author of your story. You determine what characters you allow to be in your story. If you want the mood to shift for it to be a successful story, you can switch the dynamics. So start now. Rewrite history. Rewrite your family's history. And it starts at home. Tell yourself every single day. Tell your kids every single day. Tell your spouse that we are more than what they say we are. And let's show them.
Absolutely.
This has been some powerful discussion by everyone. I'm so glad to have been a part of this for this podcast. And what I'm hoping is that our listeners will get something out of this and start to understand, recognize, right? Recognize,
understand, and live consciously. Don't just go around saying, I'm a minority. And those words matter. Words matter. They get into your subconscious and unconscious, and it helps to formulate your perception of yourself and the space that you take up in this world. Words matter. Live consciously.
You have been listening to the Access Rumor Time Conversations podcast, where the time is always rumor time, where we equip you to solve your problems one rumor at a time, where we educate you to transform your stories one rumor at a time, and where we empower you to become your own life coach one rumor at a time. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.